Let's go to Greece, sweaty Greece. Paul O'Hare, good morning to you. How are you?
How's it going, Ger? Sweaty Greece. Oh my God. How are you? Yeah, I'm good, thanks.
Well, you know, we're Irish. We're obsessed with weather. What's the weather like?
Well, that's the thing. Like, it's been the big kind of talking point, hasn't it? Like, between Turkish training camp and coming over here. Yes, it is hot, but I do think the kind of reports of the oven-like conditions that the game is going to be played in tomorrow night, I think, are going to be a bit wide of the mark. It's you know, the temperatures are probably in and around 30 degrees during the day here in Athens, but certainly last night it was probably in and around maybe the 20 degree mark, 21 degrees, and wasn't particularly humid. There was a fair breeze blowing through the city, so I don't think it's going to be like the kickoff time over here tomorrow night is going to be 9:45 p.m. We're 2 hours ahead. So by 9:45 last night, you know, it absolutely wasn't remotely kind of overbearing. Or now that's kind of sitting outside having a bite to eat. It's not running around the pitch. So look, it'll be testing, but I don't think it'll be overly taxing. But maybe famous last words.
Yeah, I think there was a possibility for 40 degrees when the draw was made. That, like, you know, the European weather is completely unpredictable, as we know, and there's going to be long portions of summers now which are completely unsafe to go out in, and that hasn't been the case. So this all looks like it's been well managed so far up to this point. The pre-match conditioning has largely taken care of any negativity that there might have been around us playing a warm weather match in June.
Yeah, I think so, and I think Stephen Kenny, he didn't come out and say it as such, but kind of alluded to it during the week when we were in Turkey last week at the training camp. So if you think back to last June, Ireland played 4 Nations League games, and the first of them was over in Yerevan in Armenia. And now that was that was seriously hot. And the game was also an earlier kickoff. It was really, really stifling, and Ireland lost that game. And, you know, they kind of picked up a little bit during that summer window, and they got the win over Scotland and the draw away to Ukraine and Poland. So they finished the window with a bit of flourish, but you can just sense that Armenia game still kind of haunts Stephen Kenny a little bit. And perhaps I think he learned lessons in terms of the preparation and in terms of the weather. So they went up to Turkey for the guts of 8-9 days, and it was warm in Turkey now. It felt warmer even at night. It felt warmer in Turkey than it has done here in Athens. But, you know, there's pros and cons to being away for 8-9 days. The fact that the championship season obviously finished so early in May, and a lot of the players just haven't had a game in the guts of 5 or 6 weeks. It was good to get everybody back in training together. On the flip side of that, you're kind of, I was going to say you're cooped up in a hotel, but they weren't exactly cooped up in a hotel. The team hotel was pretty plush and nice, and there was plenty to do. There was nice swimming pools. There was, you know, the players could go off playing golf, and they were doing water polo. They did all sorts of different things to keep themselves occupied. But that's the kind of the catch-22 of organising those training camps. Does boredom set in? But certainly from the interviews that we were doing over there, the vibe around the team certainly seemed to suggest that it was a well worth a very useful exercise, you know, in terms of getting away for those 8-9 days. So I think the lessons were learned from January last year. Or from June last year.
I know that people watching and listening will be like, well, of course they're going to tell you everything is grand, but actually when you're in a place with a large group, you can tell from looking at them, is this group happy in each other's company, or is there tension? Are they bored? Like, I think of the Euros and the amount of time that they under trap, where everybody they looked a little bit bored. There was rumours of stuff happening, of, like, you know, stuff seeps out. So the stuff seeping out, it seems like, is most people seem to be happy enough in each other's company.
Yeah, for sure. Look, I remember back in 2012, Euro 2012 in Poland and Ukraine, Ireland went to Italy for a 10-day training camp in Montecatini, sort of a place that Trapattoni had brought his former Juventus team to, and it was just it was almost like a semi-retirement home. It was that sleepy. It was such a sleepy old village, and the players, we were there for the guts of 10 or 11 days, and you'd often bump into players out sort of walking around the town in the evening, and, you know, they were bored out of their minds, basically. And there was a lot, I think Track really overdid the training sessions in Montecatini. There would have been a lot of double sessions, a lot of sort of serious training in very, very hot temperatures. Whereas the interesting thing from Stephen Kenny's point of view in Turkey last week was that while it was important to get the squad together, having the vast majority of them haven't played football in 5 or 6 weeks, as I was saying, he didn't do double training sessions, which I thought was interesting. Not suggesting he should have, but they trained early in the mornings. They were usually at the training ground by about 9 o'clock. Training ground was only about a 3 or 4 minute bus ride from their hotel, and they were well out of the town, the sort of the resort area. So they were kind of locked away in their own sort of isolated area, and the training ground was the same training ground that Martin O'Neill used in 2018 when we were in Antalya as well. The game that Declan Rice made his Ireland debut in, and was crying in the mix zone afterwards because he was so emotional about it all. But yeah, Kenny was there were single training sessions each day in Turkey, so they were sharp, they were intensive, according to the players and to the coaches that we bumped into around the team hotel and in some of the media interviews we did. But they weren't overworked, is certainly the sense that we would have got. They had been looking to play a sort of a game in Turkey, but that didn't materialise. They were looking for teams in the region, didn't materialise, so they played an 11v11 70-minute match against each other on Saturday just before the Champions League final. They tried to play the game as late as possible in the evening to kind of replicate the kick-off time in Athens, but they were only playing 70 minutes so they could get back and watch the Champions League final.
In terms of the decision making Stephen Kenny has to make, Paul, with team selection, like how important is picking players that have played football relatively recently? I guess from an attacking sense, we were chatting to Vinnie Perth in studio yesterday, and in terms of who's off or behind Evan Ferguson, you have options there in terms of Obafemi or Will Smallbone. Mikey Johnston is an option as well. Do you know what way Stephen Kenny might be leaning in that sense, in an attacking sense?
We don't really, as such. Kenny's formations are fairly fluid, and you 3-4-3, 3-5-2, and a lot of Kenny's selection issues are kind of formation dependent as well, and particularly in those attacking areas. But look, he does have a lot of decisions to make. I think it's absolutely nailed on that Evan Ferguson starts. He has to start, and he will. It's just a matter of who kind of plays off him. You would have Michael Obafemi certainly in the mix. You'd have Idah, who Kenny's always been a big fan of, and don't forget Idah didn't play a single game for Ireland in 2022 because of his injury problems, and Kenny has just been such a big fan of Idah, and he's got such a prolific scoring rate for Irish underage teams, so Kenny's a big fan of his. You've got Troy Parrott in the mix as well. I wouldn't be necessarily too swayed by the fact that Troy Parrott was put up for interviews during the week. It's not always an indication of Kenny's thinking in terms of team selection. Michael Obafemi was actually down to do media stuff with us at the training ground in Turkey the other day, along with Callum O'Dowda. But in the couple of minutes from the end of the training session to when he was walking over to us at the side of the pitch, we were sort of higher up in the stands, up near the press working area. He was being brought up there. But whatever happened between himself and conversations with either the management team or the FEI communications team, Michael Obafemi pulled out of those interviews. We weren't really given any reason as to why, and Troy Parrott was sort of added in as a last minute sub. Troy obviously, Troy didn't make the matchday squad in the end for the France game. He was in the initial squad, but he wasn't in the matchday squad, although he did admit to us the other day that he probably wasn't at his fittest for that, so that may be a reasoning. But I think, Evan Ferguson starts, and then it's one or other, I would say, of Michael Obafemi and Adam Idah.
He loves Idah, and we haven't really spoken about what the formation would look like with Idah there. Can they both change? Because I think I'm trying to get to the point where they both seem like stereotypical number 9s in many respects, but actually they both have enough in their skill set to be able to do other things as well. How would they combine? How would Idah and Ferguson combine?
Well, that's the thing. Like, Kenny was talking to us the other day about how, trying to make Evan Ferguson fit into Ireland's system is he just sort of, we were asking him about it, and he just turns around and goes, well, that's my job, to work out what the best way of getting the best out of Evan Ferguson is, because he's making the point that at Brighton, the way Brighton play, while Ferguson's notionally a centre forward, he will drop so deep that he could end up on the halfway line, because Brighton's two wingers play so high that they will draw the centre backs either side, and the centre backs are occupied by the two high wingers, and then that creates the space for those wingers to play the ball into Ferguson, who'll make a dash forward into space, and that's where he's been sort of utilised for Brighton. Whether Ireland try and sort of mimic that a little bit more, I don't know. You would have seen in the France game Ferguson kind of leading the line, and he was kind of dropping deep a lot, but that was probably to do with the nature of the opponents as well. I would personally like to see a little bit more of Ireland's, rather than Ferguson dropping deep tomorrow to receive the ball. I'd love to see Ireland's with maybe Ferguson on the front foot and maybe sort of playing a little bit higher up the pitch. And Idah, it's like Idah has been, Kenny had tried him in a couple of different positions, prior to his injury, in terms of maybe a sort of wider on the left, but he is. You're right in what you're saying in terms of they are a little bit similar in terms of out and out number nines, and maybe that's where Michael Obafemi comes into play, because of his pace, that he can play in behind Ferguson if Ferguson is going to drop a little bit deeper to receive ball and maybe link a little bit of play. But Obafemi's pace, like he's just absolutely lightning, as is Mikey Johnson, who's down as one of the five forwards in the squad. Well, he is essentially a winger, but he's down as a forward as such. So
he thinks of himself in any one of a number of different positions, judging from his own comments and how happy he will be to play in those. And actually, the way you're describing Brighton there, you could see Kenny thinking Mikey Johnson might be one of those players who plays and occupies the centre backs in that kind of in between space. So plenty for him to get his teeth into and stuck into. One other one that we just were unsure of: how fit is Ger Shane?
Yeah, well, that's like, when Ger Shane got that injury a few months ago, West Brom were pretty much ruling him out for the season. Now, he obviously did come back a little bit earlier than expected. That's a selection call to make for Kenny as well. If he does play three centre backs, so you're certainly looking at Nathan Collins on the right side. You're looking at John Egan in the middle, and then Ger Shane, like, Stephen Kenny is a huge fan of Ger Shane, and O'Shea has proved to be sort of versatile in being able to play in any of those positions across the back. But that is the big selection call. There's no Andrew Omobamidele here. There's no Shane Duffy here. So Darragh Lenihan of Middlesbrough would be possibly the next in line. He has been playing up until quite recently, because Middlesbrough are in the playoffs. They got to the playoff semi-final, and he's been playing every single week for Middlesbrough and has had a strong season. So I think that's the other big selection call, in my view, would be whether Kenny goes and trusts O'Shea despite the injury issues that he had, and the fact that he doesn't have the same amount of games in his legs that Darragh Lenihan has. So that's suddenly sort of a position that's come into sharper focus for Kenny.
I know we generally spend a lot of time in Irish media talking about the starting team that Kenny opts with, but I guess when you're playing in heat, and I know you're saying the heat mightn't be as big a factor as we thought, but the team you finish with is often the more important thing, Paul, as well, and the bench is going to be so key. I guess one aspect of that is the presumably straight choice between O'Dowda and James McLean wide left, and whoever doesn't get picked, and presumably O'Dowda is the number one choice, but McLean is going to be very, very important as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think Colin O'Dowd is nailed on for that position. Kenny bigs him up an awful lot every time he talks to us. He really, really likes O'Dowda, and we spoke to O'Dowda at the training ground the other day for interviews, and he was making the point that he really wants to make that position his own, and he feels that he's a sort of a natural fit in terms of his athletic ability. But he did acknowledge that he's had to work on his sort of defensive side of his game, because when he broke into the Ireland squad first under, was it Martin O'Neill, I think, he certainly would have played in a more advanced position. but Kenny definitely really rates him as a wing back. Probably more from an attacking sense maybe than defensively. James McLean I'm pretty sure he'll have some sort of role to play, because he's obviously on 98 caps, and if he's to even play 30 seconds on Friday night, he'll be in line to win his 100th cap against Gibraltar on Monday night. And it's a funny one in a way, because you'd be surprised if that wasn't in everyone's thinking, and give James McLean a big night on Monday night. But then if the game tomorrow night isn't going well for Ireland in any shape or form, Kenny's not one for just dishing out caps, and he said that before, whether it's newcomers who come along or uncapped players who might have been in a few squads and never got on, or goalkeepers, third choice goalkeepers being thrown on in friendlies. He's not one for really doing that too often, so I think things would want to be going reasonably well for Ireland. Or if it's a tied, if the game is level with sort of 20 minutes to go, and McLean's exactly that throw the kitchen sink kind of player that you see so often at Aviva Stadium when he comes on with 20 minutes to go and Ireland are shooting into the south stand, and everyone's on the edge of their seats and the place is deafening. So I'd expect McLean to feature at some point.
All right, Paul, we'll leave it there. Good stuff. Enjoy the next 48 hours or so. Thanks a million for joining us.
Cheers, lads. Thanks.